Today I'm going to talk about fast fashion and everything it has to do with our world and its effects. Fast fashion itself started many years ago, even though it is a recently new topic in our society that is talked about. It dates back as far as the 1800s, when typically women started to create in small shops for mostly women. Around this time was when fast fashion started to kick off, and what clothes women wore depicted their social status and trends started to become. From there, fast fashion grew into the 1900s and rapidly caught pace in the 1960s, particularly because the young generation of this time was very rebellious and had many protests against doing the norm and going against older generations. This started a trend of wearing cheaply made clothing to reject this society. As time moved on, the U.S. caught up with the trend and started outsourcing their labor and getting cheap clothing from factories in places like China, India, and the Philippines. This increased the popularity of stores that are still very popular today, like Zara, Forever 21, and H&M, which came to the U.S. around the early to mid-2000s.
Buying clothes has never been easier. 80 billion items are manufactured every year.
We're putting too much product out there, most of that product ending up in landfill.
So-called fast fashion allows consumers to buy more, but they're wearing these garments less often and disposing of them at an unprecedented rate. This is where wardrobe cast-offs end up. Savannah Rags is a clothes recycling and processing plant in Nottingham, England. They process discarded clothes from recycling bins around the country. Mohammed Patel has been running this plant for 12 years.
Majority of it will go to Africa and Dubai. We send some across to Europe, and we have a couple of buyers here in the UK that buy from us also.
Globally, sorting plants like this only deal with around 25% of discarded clothes. In Britain, more than 300,000 tonnes of clothes end up in landfill every year. It's the fastest growing category of waste in the country. But this is a global problem. Expanding middle classes in emerging markets are hungry for more and cheaper fashion. It's estimated that by 2050, global clothing sales could more than triple.
So one of the things that we've noticed that the quality of the actual material being used has gone down. We're now having to process a lot more just to get the same quality of goods that we can sell on.
But how can the fashion industry continue to grow while addressing the environmental need for people to buy fewer clothes?
Currently, there are thousands of fast fashion brands that are being used nationally and internationally, whether it's online or in-person stores. According to What is Fashion Cycle, the fashion cycle is defined as the amount of time which takes a fashion trend to emerge, peak, and fall out of style. The fashion cycle isn't a new topic. Every decade or time period has a different style and many trends that make up that time different than the others. This ties into fast fashion because fast fashion has made people not rely on fashion designers or the fashion industry to come out with new styles. Instead, people demand new styles every week, causing workers at factories and sweatshops to have to make millions of clothes at an extreme speed. The whole idea of fast fashion is affordability and fastness. This causes fashion designers to go out of work and causes many clothes to be worn for a day and then be thrown out to replace with the next big cheap clothing. Many people believe that fast fashion has allowed them to be able to feel trendy and is attainable, making the fast fashion cycle suffer on keeping up with the new trends. The environment is the most scary and most talked about impact of fast fashion. Greenhouses that create the energy for factories in these countries are creating so much gas that has made many places air pollution unhealthy. They are producing so much because they have to keep up with the extremely high demand of clothes. The fast fashion industry has acquired so many greenhouses in the world that it contributes to about 5% of the world's global greenhouse emissions, which is equivalent to the amount of greenhouses emitted by the entire worldwide aviation industry or the entire country of Russia. And that's from the environmental impact of fast fashion. Polyester, which is a cheap material that is accessible for clothes, has toxic chemicals that then get into the water gateways at greenhouses and are released into the oceans. So in the pictures there you can see the greenhouses and how much clothes can really pile up. Toxic chemicals are also being used to make clothes brighter, to fit into trends, make them look nice, and make them seem like they are better quality than they actually are. They actually account for 20% of the global industry's water pollution. When clothes are thrown away, they are never actually gone, which then adds up and pollutes areas as well.
It can take nearly 2,400 gallons of water to make a single pair of jeans. You see, how we make and buy clothes is hurting the planet. But here's a potential solution. The fashion industry is one of the most pollutive in the world, accounting for an estimated 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And as climate change intensifies, experts say it is critical to rethink how we produce clothing. Traditional manufacturing is already harmful to the environment, and after consumers throw away products, they end up in landfills. So one solution is to keep them in use longer. Companies are doing this now by accepting customers' used clothes for store credit, allowing new customers to then buy these used goods at a discount. According to ThreadUp's 2021 resale report, the value of the secondhand market is projected to double in the next 5 years to $77 billion. The CEO tells CBS Money Watch, over the next 5 years, as younger people gain more purchasing power, it's critical that brands figure this out.
That video was just a small summary of what I'm trying to explain about how dangerous fast fashion really has become, as well as saying what we can do to help by donating clothes. When thinking about fast fashion, many people don't think about who is behind these factories and who is making these clothes. In these countries overseas, most people, especially women and children, are not only being extremely overworked, but also not getting paid enough to live healthy. Some of these conditions that workers are being held in are dangerous workplaces, getting paid lower than legal minimum wage, and extremely long hours of work. This type of treatment isn't just happening in overseas countries, but is even happening in the United States. The U.S. Department of Labor reports that in Los Angeles, more than 50,000 mostly immigrant women work in clothing production, and 85% of factories violate labor laws, federal wage, and hour laws. Companies then put extreme pressure on these workers because they want efficient work fast enough to keep up with the rapid clothing need. Finally, an extremely and dangerous part about this research is the sexual and child abuse within the fast fashion workforce. Some women endure pain such as working in garment factories, being sexually abused, and forced to abort their pregnancy. Children are working way under the legal age of working and working for extremely long hours. Often parents send their kids to work for their family instead of going to school as early as 5 years old, and then are getting paid below the minimum wage. Women in these factories experience obscene gestures, sounds or stares, offensive emails, texts, or behavior that impact their safety, such as being followed home. Of the 763 women interviewed in factories in 3 Vietnamese provinces, 43.1% said they had suffered at least one form of violence or harassment in the previous year, which was a study done. And then there's the child abuse side. And then finally, what we can do. We can all try to remember just how dangerous the rise of fast fashion has become and try to shop at more locally owned stores and stores that don't use that type of manufacturing. Fast fashion effects on the world range wildly, as it is harmful to the world, people, and our health. So after having reviewed the research behind fast fashion, we can interpret that the negative impact it has on society and the environment surpass what we are getting from it as an industry.